How much time do you think will it take to move all systems to microservices? Or speaking of containerization?
100 years.
Welcome to our series entitled the IAM Podcast, a podcast about innovation, business, and most importantly, people. In this series, we'll be talking to founders, executives, and various experts about their vision, challenges, best practices, and lessons learned throughout their journey. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IAM Podcast. Today, I'm very excited. I'm joined by the CEO of Robusta.Dev, Natan Yellin. Hello, Natan.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's my absolute pleasure. And let me just start off by saying, everyone forget I'm the CEO. I was a developer for many years, and I do a lot of work with development communities. So please don't view me as a business guy. And I will try and keep things down to earth and just talk about technical details where I can.
Yes. Speaking of your introduction, yes, please give us more about your brief background, of your expertise, yes, your experience, and why should we listen to you till the end of this episode?
So you should listen because I think it'll be interesting and may give some stories about different things. I've been a developer and doing some DevOps related work for a very long time. Back to the days when I once took a server down by knocking it over with my leg. Keep me away from real physical servers. But I've been a developer for many years. Got started when I was in high school. Got involved in different open source communities with GNOME Linux. Went to a bunch of hackathons for many years. Then I transitioned to the cybersecurity world. Worked at Checkpoint. Worked at a startup called LSeed, which was bought by Rapid7. So I did a lot of work around security. And then I really got into Kubernetes when I went to LSeed and I started working in Kubernetes security. And what I saw very rapidly was there's something here that's very interesting. There's definitely a lot of complexity, but it's solving a lot of real world pain points. And on the other hand, it's very complicated. And I started thinking, well, how can we reduce that complexity? And how can we really make it, on the one hand, easier for people, but on the other hand, without restricting the power? And from there, the idea for Robusta was born.
Okay, and how many years have you been a developer in total?
Depends on how you count, but probably something like 15 years.
15 years. Okay, so what is that big issue, or is it stabilities, or what are you trying to solve?
So the main problem that we're trying to solve is that running and maintaining apps on Kubernetes is hard and time consuming. And we want it to be easy and we want it to be boring. It's like Linux. You can run stuff on Linux and you don't have to be an expert with the kernel. And you really don't care, you're just developing and you just focus on development. And we want to do the same for Kubernetes. A lot of people aren't familiar with Kubernetes. And we want to make it really easy to just get stuff up and running on Kubernetes. And when something goes wrong, we show you the bottom line. We say, here's what went wrong and how to fix it. And you can get back to doing the stuff that you care about and focus on what really is important and what's unique to you, your team, and your company. We saw that the world has become very complex and you're running all this stuff in the cloud. And there's a whole lot of stuff that you have to be familiar with. And that stuff kind of grows every single day. We've made it really easy to get stuff up and running in the cloud, but making it so easy, then ironically on day 2, the day afterwards, you have more stuff that you have to maintain and more stuff to take care of. And it's hard to be an expert in everything. It's hard to hire people who are experts in everything. And the world has gotten complex. So what I did at the previous startup is we take that world and then we'd simplify it when it came to security. We tell you, here are the top issues in your cluster, here are the top security things, and click here to fix them. And a lot of companies do that today. That's no longer unique. But then we come back to our own environments, and on our own cloud environments, we had servers crashing, and we had to onboard big customers, and we would suddenly have to scale up really rapidly. And we felt all this pain, not with regard to security. Our security was fine, but with regard to everything else. And we started thinking, just like we've simplified the world in security terms, and we tell you, okay, here are the issues and how to fix them. Can we do the same for stuff that's not security related? Can we look at your server? Can we look at performance issues? Can we look at stability? Can we look even just at stuff that's crashing or a weird error in the MongoDB database, or stuff with Kafka, or stuff with all these different microservices that we're running, and with Kubernetes itself, of course. And when something goes wrong, can we just tell you, here's the bottom line, and click here to fix it? And for a time that was really an open question. Is that actually something that's feasible and possible to build from a technical perspective? And today I'm happy that the answer seems to be yes. So that's what we do. We look at your cloud, we look at your Kubernetes cluster, we say, here are the issues, and click here to fix them. And the way that we're doing that is fairly unique.
Yeah. How do you do that? How unique is your product? How better it is from the existing solutions?
Okay, so what the existing solutions do today is they throw a whole lot of data at you. And I've been there and I've used all these solutions. I've used them for many years, but we have a big data problem. And a lot of times you speak to people about all this stuff and the solution is just to throw more data at it. But you have companies, and I've seen this myself, you're gathering terabytes of data. You have logs, you have metrics, you have alerts, you have open telemetry data, you have all this different data, and none of that data is correlated. So an error occurs, and now you have to start digging and trying to find the real data that helps you solve your problem. And sometimes now people start looking at machine learning solutions and really complex solutions that try and bring automatic insights. But the problem fundamentally is simpler than that. All the data is there, and I can even tell you exactly what to do. I can say, if this issue happens, then go and bring in this data. To give the simplest example, if you're working on Kubernetes and the pod crashes, then you just want to pull in the logs and look at that. If you have an issue with CPU, then you want to look at what other things are using the CPU, what else is running on the same node. Do you have CPU limits? Do you have CPU requests, and so on? There's set stuff that you want to look at for every single type of error. So what we're doing is we're essentially building this open source community of kind of a giant rules book saying, when this happens, this is the right data that you have to see. And then we're building automations that will pull in the right data at the exact right time and show you exactly what you need to solve an error. So we sit on top of your existing tools. So we're sitting on top of your existing monitoring tools, on top of your existing Prometheus, top of your existing stack, on top of your existing Elasticsearch. And then we pull in all the data, and all the data goes to us. And then stuff is triggered under different conditions that identifies all these common errors and all these errors that other companies have had. Then we show you the exact right data at the exact right moment. Say, okay, here's the bottom line. This is why this issue is happening. And this is the extra context you need. And this is how you fix it.
How much of an impact does your product give to the company or to the production team?
We're seeing and we're hearing from companies that have tried out all these other different observability tools. I was just earlier this week on a call with a US company that has something like 8,000 employees. And they said, we're setting up the monitoring on our Kubernetes cluster, and we tried out all these different solutions. And a lot of them were really complex and they were hard to set up. And I took Robusta and I was able to install the open source and the user interface and the SaaS platform. I was able to set it all up in under 5 minutes. And right away, without any customization, without any configuration, I saw the data that I wanted to see, and I understood what was going on. So that type of story makes me really happy. When I hear about that from people, and I see that we're solving a real pain point here, that really makes me happy, and that's what drives us forward as a team. And the other thing I think we're doing here, which is really unique, is we're not putting this behind some big wall. We're not saying to you, we're going to take your cluster and we're going to make your issues better, and okay, now fork over this huge sum of money for that. What we do is really split into two parts. We have an open source platform. That's this automations engine. And that's all these rules that tell you what to do and tools for manually troubleshooting stuff when the automated stuff doesn't cover it. We have all this content there. And we're building that. That's all completely open source. Anyone can take it. Sometimes companies take that without even and start using it without even speaking to us. We discover later on that they're using it. So we have all that content and really that solution and everything that I've spoken about in the open source, and people can take it and they can use it, and you don't have to get permission from me. You can just take it and use it, and that will provide value in and of itself. And then we've also heard from people, okay, well, I want more than that. I want a single pane of glass. I want one place where I can go for visibility and take all those insights that I'm getting from the open source, and I don't just want to see those in Slack or in MS Teams or in other places I can send it today. Give me a single pane of glass, make it all even easier. Give me a SaaS platform for that. And that's kind of where the commercial side also comes into play. But we're not, I think what's really unique to our strategy is we're trying to make this as accessible as possible. We don't want there to be a single person in the world who won't use Robusta because of the cost, or who won't use Robusta because it's too hard to set up. So we're trying to make this in every way possible as easy as we can for everyone to get started. And as you go on, you can customize it, you can add on more stuff, but we want you to just take something out of the box, get started, get value, get it for free. And ultimately later on, we'll give you the ability to add on more features and get other stuff when it's appropriate for you.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, like adding more features, like you're making it very easy for developers, right? Do you have any plan to create this kind of alert and fixes also for other technology? Just a question.
Yeah, short answer is yes. We're very, very driven by what we hear from people. So just recently we heard from someone who said, okay, I want a better way. This was at a bank in another Middle Eastern country. I don't want to show too many details, but this was in another Middle Eastern country at a bank, and someone there said to me, okay, I'm running these Java applications on Kubernetes, and I have an issue here with a memory leak, and I really need better troubleshooting tools to understand what's going on there. Can you add something to Robusta that will help me understand why that's happening? And we said, of course. And it's we have very rapid turnaround for stuff like that. And so within a few days to 1 to 2 weeks tops, then we take stuff like that we hear from people, and then we add it onto the product. And we're very, very driven by what we hear from people, from the issues that people have in production, by the alerts they have. And according to that, we're always growing our coverage of the type of stuff we know how to identify and that we can provide fixes for. So short answer is yes, we will cover other stuff in Kubernetes, but we'll cover it when it makes sense for our user base.
Okay, that's something to watch out for. Who's your target market?
Everyone doing anything with Kubernetes today. So it comes down to really 3 different people. It comes down to platform teams in DevOps and SREs, and grouping all those together. But it comes down to people who are really doing the operations side. We're building a platform which other people then take. So those are the people who are responsible for the platform itself, or responsible for production. That's the first group. And I'm, again, grouping in together there are different personas, but I'm just putting there as they have a lot of similarity with one another. Second group is people who are doing like tier 2, tier 3 support, and they need a system where they can come in and they can handle different issues that come up, and they want to have some level of really autonomy. And they can, when an issue occurs, they want to be able to apply these fixes, and they want to be able to just handle stuff themselves. But often the developers or the DevOps or the SREs or the platform team, they want to kind of pre-approve the workflows that those people can do to fix issues that come up. And they don't want to give them power to do absolutely anything on production, but they want to approve a small limited number of pre-built fixes. So that's the second group of people, those tier 2, tier 3 support. And the third, of course, and the one that I would say I'm closest to myself coming from that background, is developers. Developers who are running on Kubernetes and who want a solution that works for them. A lot of the monitoring tools out there really were built with a different mindset. They were built for these monolith applications. They were built for these teams where you have a support that's just handling everything. And it's different today. If you're monitoring a microservices world, you need an observability solution that's built for that world. In the traditional world with monoliths and stuff, the life was easy because you had one monolith application and you just had to send out alerts. And when they arrived, you always knew what to do to fix it. For example, if there was high CPU, you had to grow the server, put it on a bigger server, or fix it in the application. In today's world, you can have high CPU, but it's not because just of something in your own application, because of other applications running on the same node, because of other issues with the cluster. And it's no longer sufficient to just look at graphs. You have to kind of run decision trees. And they're very simple, but that sort of stuff is not what the traditional monitoring does. And for developers, it's something that developers really get. And developers understand that if you have this error that occurs, there's a relatively fixed pattern that they use to troubleshoot it, and a lot of that can be automated. So creating a product that's really built for developers, that third audience that we're building for, is very different in many ways than building for the other audiences. But it's something that we really care a lot about and think a lot about.
Okay, I think I have read it on your website. It's like, or did you mention that from the last conversation? Like it's like having a team member, an additional member.
Yeah, we heard that from someone recently who said, okay, Robusta is like having another team member that I can just hand off alerts to, and he'll go and he'll research the alerts for me, and then just give me the bottom line. And that's great feedback. I mean, that's what we're out to do, and that's what we want to do. And you're running the same software as other people. You're running the same infrastructure. You have a lot of the same issues. There's no reason why each company should then have to go and do that fine tuning on the others themselves. It's gotten to the point where when we come to companies, say we see companies using the Prometheus operator in Kubernetes, and I can tell you already, if you're running on EKS and on AWS's Kubernetes platform, I can tell you these are the alerts you're going to have by default, which need fine tuning. These are spammy. If you're running on GCP, these will be the alerts. These are spammy. And we can already come and fix that for you out of the box because we've seen it so many times. So there's no reason why you should have developers at all these different companies doing the same effort. It makes no sense. And everyone has better things to do. You'd rather be delivering a feature. You'd rather be doing something that's work that you care about and not doing the busy work. And at the same time, you also don't want to just ignore those alerts and let them pile up because you don't have time to get to them.
Cool. Cool. Okay. Well, this is a question from one of our DevOps, like our DevOps engineer. How much time do you think will it take to move all systems to microservices? Or speaking of containerization?
100 years. There's stuff out there. I just read an article recently about all the stuff out there that still is running Fortran and Banks. So I don't think we're ever going to have everything move. There will always be a hybrid world. And also, if you look at Robusta, we will always have to support. Right now, we're focused on Kubernetes, but we will always, even going forward, have to also look at other environments and how people integrate them. So I don't think we're ever going to move entirely to microservices. Enterprises, big enterprises often will work on stuff when it becomes a huge pain point. Sometimes when it's too late, but when something becomes a big pain point, and if stuff is out there and legacy systems are working well enough, it's hard to justify the business cost for moving stuff. And each person has to make the decision on their own when it's right for them to move, when the overhead isn't worth it. But I think a big question about this, and we look at it from a monitoring perspective, is about how do you make stuff easier? And I think we can make it easier for people to move those monolithic applications onto Kubernetes, or to take a monolith and then start to scale there, then start to break out different pieces, then more people are going to do that. It's all about the ease of use at the end of the day and how easy you can make it for people.
Okay. Speaking of making it easier for people, what was your vision?
We want a world where you have a single pane of glass. It tells you these are the issues with your applications. It doesn't matter if it's Kafka or MongoDB or a Python application or a Java application that has problems with the JVM. Whatever your issue is, we will tell you this is the issue and click here to fix it. And when there's more than one possible fix, we will give you those buttons and we will say, here are your two options and here's how you fix it, and you click the button. We don't do automated fixes today, not because we can't, but we hear from users that they want to push the button and they want to remain in control. So I expect that will remain that way for some time in the future. But our vision is a world where if you look at it, you have all these different Docker files and all these different pieces of open source software that you can set up and you can download from the internet. And it's very easy to set up. But afterwards, when it comes to maintaining them, all of that burden is on you. And our vision is a world where that burden goes back to the open source projects themselves. And we're just like you can have infrastructure as code for installing open source software. And just like there's kind of knowledge about how you install servers embedded inside that Docker file, we're taking the knowledge for how you maintain them afterwards in production, and we're turning that to code with troubleshooting as code. So our vision is a world, where you look at that single pane of glass and tells you here are the issues and click here to fix them. But behind the scenes, what powers that is the fact that there's this troubleshooting as code and these rules and these automations that are intimately familiar with each of the precise issues that each open source can have and what the best practice is for fixing those.
Okay, so you said this is your first full-fledged startup, right? Could you talk to us about, the core team? Who started it all?
Great question. So I started with my co-founder, Arik, and our CTO, who I worked with in the past. And then for the rest of the core team, we brought in people at the beginning who we know from our personal connections, and constantly growing. Just right now, we're hiring DevOps, we're hiring front end, we're hiring a developer advocate, we're looking for an office manager. So we're growing very fast. And when it comes to the team building, what's most important to us is really two things. First and foremost, you have to be a person we enjoy working with. And you have to be someone who we can really build a company together with, and who is easy to work with, who we get along with, who likes people. And that's really important to us. And two, you have to be someone who has a bigger, wider sense of responsibility and who wants to make an impact. We're not hiring people who we just give an assignment to and say, here, take this and do it this way. We're hiring people where we can say to them, here's the problem. Now you go find the fixes and we'll enable you to go, and we'll give you the resources you need and the time to go and fix that and to implement that properly.
Okay, so you spoke about hiring the best people. There is a recruiting bloodbath right now in the Israeli tech. So how do you deal with that?
To be honest, we don't feel it. Maybe that means we're part of the problem, not the solution. we don't feel it. We offer good conditions to everyone. We offer significant options. We give people an environment where they can do meaningful work. I think we're the smallest startup in Israel offering paid paternal leave, paid parental leave, not just for women, but also for men. We give men as well 1 month of paid leave after they have a kid. And to be honest, we don't feel the pain, but we're trying to build an environment that's the environment that we want to work in ourselves as developers, where you can have a big impact, where you're not being micromanaged, where you see the big picture, where there's lots of transparency, where you know why you're working on what you're working on, where if you have to work in the future, then you get on a call with the customer and you hear from them firsthand about what's involved in it. And you attract a certain type of people. And you also don't attract a certain type of people. There's a certain type of person that doesn't speak to whatsoever, who just wants to come in. They want to get told, okay, program this, program that. And they do, and they go home. And we're not the right fit for everyone, but for the people who we're the right fit for, they know they want to work for us, and we know that we want them to work for us. So it works itself out.
Yes, build that kind of environment where you like to work in. So how do you communicate your vision? I mean, I'm curious, what is an effective way to, create buy-in with your team?
Okay, so you have to split it into buy-in with our own team internally within the company. And then you have to split it into how do we create buy-in with our users and our customers and everyone else out there in all the open source community. And for our own team, I think that's the easy part. We make sure everyone has their voice heard. And I'm a big believer that it's important everyone gets their say. And then we might take a decision that someone disagrees with, but they've had their say, we heard all sides, and then we made the decision. And I think that's a big part of it, creating transparency and explaining to people why we're doing this. What's the big picture? What's the overall goal right now? What KPI do we care most about? And really spending the time to explain to people. And then once you explain to people and you have that transparency and you put people in front of customers and you let them hear firsthand and you let them see what challenges we're facing now as a company, that just aligns people automatically, because people they see the same stuff that you see, and they see the whole big picture, and then they understand why what they're working on is important. Or if it's not, they'll come to you and they say, I'm actually supposed to work on this, but I think that doesn't move the bottom line. I should be working on something else instead. So I think just transparency creates that alignment within the team. And for the more broad alignment, we do a lot of educational content around Kubernetes. I have a YouTube series where I cover different Kubernetes tools called 100 Kubernetes tools. We have a lot of blogging that we do. The first blog post that we released on our corporate blog, we called Kubernetes is complex because you want complex things. That really goes into what Kubernetes is and whether the complexity of that is justified or not. And so we're doing a lot of different content here with the community, and we have our open source out there, which gets a lot of interest, and we have a lot of people come and install that and want to contribute back to the open source, and we try and make that as easy as possible. And I guess the answer here, the bottom line is that it's the same as creating internal alignment. You just have to spend time explaining, you have to create a lot of material, and you have to make sure that everyone sees the picture. And the additional part here is you have to solve real world problems. We have a product that you can try out before you buy and before you even speak to us. Now, in many ways, it's a good thing, but the downside of that, not the downside, but the risk with that is if you try out our product and it doesn't solve a real problem for you, if you try out and it doesn't take 60 seconds to install, and before you've spoken to me, before you've spoken to a salesperson, before anything, I'm not going to get a second chance there. So by putting out a product there that anyone can sign up and use on their own, whenever they want, you don't need to speak to me. There's no gate. It's just easy to use. We're judged by whether our product actually solves a real problem for you, not on the promises that we give you on the sales call. So I think that's really how it comes together. It's you do a lot of material, you create a lot of material, and you educate people and you show them, and then you let them decide for themselves. And if it's not for them, that's fine. It's not for everyone. But we're developing something that we think is useful, and take it yourself and decide for yourself if it's useful.
Interesting. Like how many percent like go back to you and say, okay, your product is amazing?
We hear it. We hear it a lot. And we hear it more and more every day, which I really like. And whenever I get stuff like that, I send it to my team and they say, hey, look what this person said, and this is what they really liked. So let's keep on doing this. And I think what we get complimented about most is, one, how fast it is to install and how easy it is to set up. And two, that the open source is really standalone, and you can take it and you can use it without sending any data to our servers, and you can set everything up on your own. And we're not going to force you to pay for anything. Like if you want the paid features, then we'll happily sell them to you, but you don't need them. You can use it without that. Not everyone will be a paid customer, and that's okay. And happy customers makes me happy and makes the whole team happy. So I think everything has to start from there.
Yeah. A while ago, you mentioned about transparency, the team. During the last conversation, I cannot forget you said you cannot say someone is responsible if they cannot even, call the shots, like make decisions. So please talk to us about that.
Okay, so I was in the job once that was a very frustrating job. I did a bit of a role as a PM/product. It's kind of a hybrid role. And I was responsible for everything, but I had no say on anything that happened. It was a very, very frustrating position to be in. And you can't work like that. If you're going to make people responsible, then you have to also listen to their opinion, and you have to also give them the tools to do things. You have to both give them the context, meaning put them on calls with customers, let them hear for themselves, let them see the big picture. Never say to someone, oh, but there's data here that you don't see. Well, show it to them. So you have to give people the context. And then in addition to giving people the context, you also have to give them the power to make decisions. And that's what I think a lot of managers are scared about. Because if you give them the power to make decisions, there will be points where they will have a different opinion than you. And sometimes you'll be wrong. Sometimes they'll be wrong. So it has to go hand in hand with what they say at Facebook, move fast and break things. I like to say move fast and break things, but then fix them fast. So you have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to let team members make mistakes. But it's the only way that scales. You can't grow a company really fast if you're centralizing all the decision-making authority. And if you're deciding everything yourself, and if you have a say in anything, it just doesn't work. You can't scale that way. So you have to bring on good people. You have to empower them. You have to let them make mistakes and be forgiving of that. And that's okay, because we make mistakes too. So you're no different than us. And you have to create an environment where people aren't afraid of making mistakes. And you have to empower them and bring on really good people. And if you do that, then you also attract the right people who really want to work in that environment. You attract the type of people who want to be treated as independent decision makers, who want to really have that impact. So it's a win-win for both.
Okay, is that because you're 30 and you're a risk taker, or well, how did you get that? Where did you get that?
It's how I always wanted to work as a developer and how I was treated on the best teams that I worked on. And I don't think it's because I'm 30 and I'm a risk taker. I mean, I'm getting married next month. Well, Corona wedding in my parents' backyard. So I'm not that young single founder who's just a workaholic. And a lot of the people in our team, a lot of our core team members have kids. And like I mentioned about paternal leave as well. We're a fairly family-friendly environment. So for me, it's just the only way that makes sense. It's not that we're willing to take all these big risks. It's that if you don't take any risks, you're taking the biggest risk of them all. or if you
Mm.
centralize all the decision-making power, and then I'm sick for a day, well, no one else in the company can do anything. So it doesn't work like that. That's a way bigger risk. There's a bigger systematic risk. And when you take the small risks and you put people in situations where they can make mistakes and they learn from them, then you end up with a core team that's really competent and really good and really motivated. And that's kind of the least risk scenario out of everything.
Yeah. Wow. Bring good people. So that's the first thing. You really have to find the good people that you can trust and give responsibility to, and then give the full context and empower them. Could you talk to us about a time where someone made a decision, you don't approve of that decision, but you went that way anyway? Was there a
All the
time?
time, all the time. I could probably give you 5 examples just from today. It happens all the time on prioritizing features, prioritizing which feature to work on. But what I try and do is we have discussions like this. I try and say, okay, what do you think we should do? Hear from everyone. If I have extra input, then I'll give input. Okay, my opinion here is this. Do you agree, disagree? And at the end of the day, we have to make a decision. So there are cases where the decision maker is the person who's leading it, the person who's leading that feature, the person who has the most context for that. There's cases where the decision maker is me, but it happens all the time. I mean, you want to, and most of the time, a lot of the time, I'm wrong anyway. And we'll find out later on that other people are right about it. But I think the other thing that helps in this type of scenario is to also gather data and be very data driven. Like if we have a decision we have to make about which feature is more important, then it doesn't matter what my intuition is. It doesn't matter what your intuition is. It matters how many customers we hear about this feature from. What do they say? And if you ask the customers now if they're going to prioritize that versus other features, what do they say?
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
I try not to be in situations where it's just a matter of my opinion versus someone else's opinion. It's more a matter of what does the data say, and then you only fall back to that type of decision making when you have no data. And then usually the obvious decision is go get more data.
I remember one of the people I've invited in the podcast, like Nimrod Kramer. Do you know him? So he also said, deal without Dev. So he also said like, okay, ask the opinion of like data. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Right. So now how many people are you now on your team? Where are you in your journey? And what is the road ahead for Robusta.Dev?
We're 7 people right now. And like I said before, we're hiring a whole bunch of roles. So if anyone is listening to this and interested, then please reach out. And looking forward, we're really going to grow the product. We're going to add on more and more content for the types of stuff that we can cover. We're going to take the top 1,000, eventually top 10,000 different issues that can go wrong in production on Kubernetes. And for every single one, we're going to show you the right context, show you exactly what you need. That's one part of it. The other part of it is really what to do when those automations break down. When those automations don't cover your case, we're giving their really strong troubleshooting tools, so you can troubleshoot whatever you want in Kubernetes. You can attach a debugger just as easily as you would attach a debugger to a local process. You can debug stuff, applications that are leaking memory and so on. So we're trying to really make it easier to manually troubleshoot stuff. And then looking beyond that, we're really trying to give you that single pane of glass for everything that can go wrong, and here are the things you click on to fix them, and to wrap that all up, all the other stuff, in the easy to use user experience. So looking forward, we're going to grow the open source community, going to work more with our enterprise partners and hear from them what they need and grow the product accordingly. And I can't tell you like we're going to have this feature in 3 months or this feature in 6 months, because it really depends on what we hear from other people. We know today what the most important things are for companies, and we're going to be agile, and we're going to work according to what makes sense on a weekly or quarterly or monthly basis. But I don't believe in just planning a roadmap ahead for 2 years into the future, because it's going to change according to what we see.
Well, how do you, speaking of that, like, okay, you don't know what's going to happen. How do you handle unexpected situations or complex situations, challenges?
You do the best you can. you do the best you can and you treat people like a mensch, and when you make mistakes, you apologize and you say, I made a mistake here. And if your product does something it shouldn't do, then you say, okay, yeah, we had a bug, and you're transparent. And then you go and you fix that, and you give a timeline for when you can fix it. That's kind of for negative unexpected situations. And for positive unexpected situations, you jump on the call with someone and they say, oh, can you do X, Y, and Z? And I have budget for that. An example of that, recently we had someone request an on-prem version of our product. It's not something we plan to do, but we said, look, we'd love to do this for you. It sounds like it's really important for you. For us, it's not something we were planning to do. So is this something you have budget for? And they said, absolutely yes. And we have a sizable budget here. So we said, okay, let's do this. And then we have to take that, we have to work that into the roadmap, but we move fast. So we're pretty agile. So I haven't yet ran into something that people asked us to do, which was months away from doing. It's typically stuff that we can really do in a short period of time.
Yes, you have to move fast. Okay, speaking of that, okay, that's like a belief in the startup community, right? You have to move fast. You cannot afford to develop a product for a long time before you put it out. So is there a commonly held belief in a startup space that now you say, I disagree with that?
I think there's a belief that doing a startup, especially even as an employee, is kind of a high risk thing to do. And I don't think that's true. I think especially as an employee, really joining a startup, even an early stage startup, often does offer some amount of job security. Maybe not on a 10-year basis, but it does offer sometimes a decent amount of security. You can get fair compensation. You don't have to work all around the clock. You can have good benefits. Like I mentioned, we offer paid paternal leave. So I think it isn't as scary as sometimes people think it is. Even if you have a family, even if you have kids, even if you have a life outside of work, which is good and which you should have, it doesn't have to be this huge sacrifice about either doing a startup or having a family life.
Yes, you mentioned about work life. How do you integrate work and life?
You set boundaries and you listen to your significant other.
Set boundaries. So what should every CEO start and stop doing?
Okay. You should stop doing everything you don't have to do. Anything you can delegate, there's always too much to do. So anything that you can delegate to someone else to do, you should delegate. And there are a few exceptions I'll touch on, but for the most part. And even if someone is going to do something 80% as well as you will, do it 80% as well as you'll do it today. But if you bring talented people to your company and you make that part of their job description, you say, okay, now you're in charge of X, they will do 200% of it as well as you by a month from now. So by offloading stuff to other people, they might at the beginning do it a little bit worse than you, but they're going to focus on it and they're going to give it all their attention, which you can't do. So they'll do it better than you down the road anyway. I think the stuff that you can't delegate is really three types of things. One, fundraising. It's not that you can't delegate it. It's just that if you're going to delegate fundraising to someone else, you're probably better off also giving them the title CEO. The core part of what you do as CEO. So first is fundraising. Second is working with customers or working with the most important customers. And some of that you do delegate, but ultimately, the way I view it, at least, the most important thing in the company is that you have happy customers and you're solving real problems. And like they say, the buck stops here. The ultimate responsibility for that is on you as a CEO. And the third thing, I think, is kind of everything else. If there are interpersonal issues or if there's other stuff that comes up that has to be dealt with, or basically kind of everything else category, everything else that comes up that maybe people don't want to deal with or would rather push off or want someone else to take care of. So as CEO, then I think ultimately you have the responsibility that everything is just working smoothly, and wherever anything isn't, there's no one else you can blame. Like you can't delegate to someone else and say, oh, it's that person's responsibility. Like if they don't want to do it, or if they say that, well, that's not my job. Like ultimately the bottom line is that everything is ultimately your responsibility. But that's kind of as the last line defense, right? Like you try and delegate to other people, but everything that slips between the cracks then is your responsibility.
Yeah, I love that power of delegation. So what do you want to put beside your name? I'm Natan, your blank CEO. How do you want to be known for as a CEO?
I'd rather not be known. I'd rather our developers be known. I'd rather our developers and the people in our team be known. I'm Natan, and he was the manager of X.
Okay, so okay, developer first. Lead them.
And employees first, not just developers. Also, when we bring on people for marketing people, I want other people to do their job, and I want other people to get recognition for the work they do. And I don't need my name to be out there. I want our open source contributors to get recognition for what they do. I'd rather, if I'm going to be known, I'd rather be mentioned as, oh, that was Natan who hired whoever, and that person is known, and I'm known by proxy to that person.
Interesting. Yeah. Where can they easily reach you?
Okay, so Natan, Natan, at Robusta.Dev, Robusta.Dev. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn. You just Google Natan Yellin or Natan Robusta. And I'm on Twitter. I post regularly. I'm on YouTube. I have a channel. We have a channel for Robusta on YouTube. We have a few different series, 100 Kubernetes tools. We have a series on troubleshooting Python applications on Kubernetes. We're always creating new content. And have a personal blog, but it hasn't been updated in some time. Find me wherever. If you can't find me, then send an email to the email address I mentioned, and let me know how I can help.
Thank you very much, Natan. And it was a pleasure having you here on the IAM Podcast.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here.
This podcast is powered by IAMOps.io. Optimize your cloud infrastructure and CI/CD process with IAMOps.io dedicated DevOps team. Check out www.iamops.io and get a DevOps team now. Make sure to check out www.iamops.io if you want to know more about us. Subscribe to our podcast so you can get notified every time we post a new video. Thank you, and you have a great day.